After a successful night in the Champions League, attention turns back to the Premier League for Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. West Ham will make the short trip from East London with a new manager at the helm, Nuno Espirito Santo, and his side picked up a decent draw at Everton on Monday Night Football, and come Saturday afternoon, they'll be looking to deny Arsenal of all 3 points. We're going to preview the fixture and more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to the show. Apologies for the lack of a live stream this morning, as I'm sure you guys have realised, regular viewers and listeners would have realised over the last few days that we've had some internet issues in my area. I am told that this issue will be resolved today, but I didn't want to take the risk of going live again and ended up getting caught with the stream kind of dying midway through, because it just creates a lot of work for me after, in terms of editing it, cutting bits out, posting the audio version of the pod and all the rest of it. But also it's kind of embarrassing and very, very unprofessional. So I figured what we'd do to be safe today is pre-record the episode. So again, apologies, we're not live, but we're still going to bring you the same level of quality content. And we're looking at that game against West Ham United. Now, I think this game got a lot harder the minute that Nuno Espirito Santo was appointed as the West Ham United boss. Apart from the kind of obvious new manager bounce that we talk about all the time, things were clearly not going well under Graham Potter, and it felt like there was a huge disconnect actually between that group of players and their coach. Now, I've mentioned this a few times before on other shows when sort of talking generally about West Ham United. I covered, I think, 4 or 5 of their last, I want to say 8 games of the last Premier League season as a commentator. And for those that don't know, when you go and do a commentary game for BBC London, not only are you doing the commentary, but you're also doing the post-match. You're going down, you're speaking to the managers, to anyone else that the club's put up, players, whatever. And, you know, they were difficult sort of moments in terms of just trying to get, you know, some good, solid, strong answers out of Graham Potter, because it felt like he was always on the defensive. Now, as someone who's covering the game, you never want to be disrespectful. And one of my big bugbears is when you hear people talking about how a press conference should have gone, or how this should have been said, or that should have been said. Like, there is a level of professionalism that you need to maintain. And in order to do that, you need to be respectful, right? You should be respectful anyway. But whenever I pressed or pushed a little bit harder against Graham Potter because his team was simply not performing, I always felt like he got super defensive and he never really had any answers. Now, I know that he's not going to come out publicly and give you all of his answers, and I know that what he says in the media is probably going to be very different to what he says in the changing room, but I just had a feeling from then that it was never going to work for West Ham under Graham Potter. It didn't feel like he had a Graham Potter compatible squad, if that makes sense. You know, they sort of moved on from David Moyes the way they did, and there was a lot of debate about whether or not that was the right decision. And then they bring in Julian Lopetegui, and they spend quite big, and they allow Lopetegui to go out and kind of really try and put his mark on the squad. They relieve him of his duties pretty quickly. Graham Potter comes in. He hasn't got that much time to kind of get going, but a club like West Ham, despite the fact they haven't won that much silverware in their history, there is high demands. There is an expectation to play football in a certain way, and I think Graham Potter's appointment was in part to try and bring that to the football club, but it didn't materialise. It never got going, and at the start of this season you felt like he was on thin ice already, and obviously their questionable start ended up with him getting the sack. This game, as I say, is a lot harder for Arsenal for Nuno being involved. And partly because, you know, Graham Potter wasn't working out, but also partly because just stylistically, I think Nuno brings something to the table that in the past we've struggled with. You know, he prides himself on a good defensive stability, but I do feel at times Nuno's been unfairly labelled as a very defensive coach. I don't necessarily think that's the case, because he's been able in so many of his previous jobs to formulate kind of smart, effective, and above all, I guess, efficient ways of attacking. if you look at Forest last season, they were incredible on the counter-attack. That wasn't a coincidence. They were incisive in everything that they did. There was a lot of accuracy when they did break out from those kind of low block positions and into those transitional attacking situations. So that is all very, very deliberate, and therefore, people that say Nuno is just a defensive coach, I think are incredibly unfair. And as I say, we face a very, very different challenge as a result of him being there. A few stats and facts going into this game that kind of jumped out at me. Arsenal obviously have lost their last 2 home games versus West Ham United. And if they were to beat us on Saturday, they'd only be the second side to win 3 consecutive Premier League games at our place against us. Man City obviously being the first team to do that. I think they won 6 in a row during a dreadful period for us, or at least a period in which it was clear there was a huge gap between the two sides. In terms of from an Arsenal point of view, sort of players-wise, one of the facts that jumped out to me when I was sort of reading through some of the information going into this game is that Bukayo Saka's set to make his 200th Premier League appearance in this game. And he'll be doing that at the age of 24 years and 29 days, which would make him the 7th youngest player to reach that milestone, and the youngest since Raheem Sterling did it back in October 2018. The only Arsenal player, though, to score in his 200th Premier League appearance for the club was Thierry Henry. So Bukayo Saka has an opportunity to level that up with the great Thierry Henry. And he, of course, back in 2005, got 2 goals against Crystal Palace in the game that marked his 200th Premier League appearance. So there's a little milestone for Bukayo Saka in terms of what he'll be reaching, but also he's got the opportunity to mark it with a goal as well. West Ham's one to watch is undoubtedly the captain, Jarrod Bowen. He scored on Monday Night Football, and he's been involved in 11 goals in his last 12 Premier League appearances, scoring 8 and assisting 3. When you think about how poor West Ham have been of late, that's pretty damn impressive. He's also scored 5 career goals against Arsenal in all competitions, including that winner in the league game at Emirates Stadium last season. So he's one that we've got to be well aware of. Look, for us, every game, I think, at this stage of the season, even at this early stage, feels huge. There's a real opportunity here for Arsenal to start a run. And I know you shouldn't always look beyond the task at hand, right? We've learnt the hard way that the Premier League is unrelenting, unforgiving, and if you're not at your best, you will be caught out and you will be punished. So while there's a part of me that doesn't want to look down the line, I think coming out of the run of fixtures that we've just had and that we've kicked off the campaign with, I think it's impossible not to do that, because I feel like we're looking for a bit of respite just in terms of the way the fixtures look. We've got Fulham away after this. We've got Palace at home, 2 London derbies. Fulham away isn't going to be easy. Palace at home. Palace have shown that they can compete with anybody under Oliver Glasner. Tactically, he's a brilliant, brilliant coach, and he's set up a team and a system that's caused all sorts of problems to some of the game's biggest boys. Burnley away is one that we have to win, as far as I'm concerned. And Sunderland away is not going to be easy, but again, that's one, against a newly promoted side away from home that you'd be looking at for all 3 points. Now, I'm not saying we are going to take maximum points, because I'd be a little bit naive if I said that. Do I think we can? I think we can, of course. But I'm not going to say we're going to, because it's the Premier League, and it would be sort of disrespectful to those sides to be sitting here going, we're going to win 5 out of 5. But West Ham, Fulham, Palace, Burnley, Sunderland, after going to Old Trafford, going to Anfield, going to Newcastle, playing Manchester City, it's a much better run than the one we've just come out of the back of. So if we've got through that run, staying within touching distance, just 2 points off the top, there's no reason why we shouldn't be excited about the prospect of putting a bit of a run together here and getting some points on the board and really applying some pressure on Liverpool, who currently sit at the top. It's also worth noting, by the way, that Liverpool are away at Chelsea this weekend, and I think there's a potential, as a result of that, to make up some ground on them. So the psychology of this, I think, is really, really interesting. When you've gone through the games that we've gone through, and when you look at the way we approach some of those games, which was just a little bit more pragmatic than a lot of people would have liked. We keep talking about the need to kind of take the handbrake off, and we've discussed how you go about doing that. It feels like all of the games coming up, whether home or away, they're games that warrant you being a little bit more front-footed and allowing your attacking players to go out and express themselves in the way that we know they can. And essentially that should mean that we have too much for each and every one of those opponents. But yeah, like, don't take it as a given. Don't take it for granted that we're going to go and win all those games. Not because I don't think we're good enough to. We absolutely are. And I want us to, and I hope we will. And I expect us, if we don't take maximum points, not to drop any more than 2 across those 5 games. And, so there is an expectation this season. There is a sort of demand from us as supporters to see this team go out and do the business. But it's the Premier League, and you've always got to take that into consideration. Just before we continue on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Arsenal's approach specifically to this game, we're going to share with you the lineup that I would like to see, and we're going to share with you a prediction as well. And by the way, my prediction for Olympiacos, and not for the first time this season, was absolutely spot on. Score and everything, not just the outcome, but the score as well. So we'll do that in a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to let you guys know that there is a brand spanking new Patreon video out. You can go over to patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna to find it. The link is in the description below. And it is a look at Martin Ødegaard's performance against Olympiacos with video footage. Go over, check it out, sign up, become a patron, support me to continue bringing you daily Arsenal content. I really, really appreciate those of you that are already signed up. If you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence about it, I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Go over patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. And not only do you get bonus exclusive content, but you also get to download every single episode of The Chronicles of Aguna completely ad-free, which I know for a lot of you is a big, big deal. Also, if you're with us on YouTube right now, don't forget to leave a like on the video. That really helps. Subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. Okay, so we talked about taking the handbrake off a fair few times, haven't we, over the last few weeks? What does that look like? How do we go about it? I guess it's going to be horses for courses, and it's going to be down to Mikel Arteta to get that balance right, as we've talked about, between rotating, picking the right attacking weapons, if you like, to take on the relevant challenges and whatever challenge it is you face that week. But if you asked me, what does taking the handbrake off look like going into West Ham at home, who I think are going to sit behind the ball, who I think are going to try and soak up pressure. They've had a week with Nuno now, so although he won't have implemented everything, he would have certainly made his mark on the team. He's notorious for going into places, turning them around quite quickly, making them sturdy quite quickly. People will tell you that they don't really enjoy his football, and ultimately it feels like that, in combination with a kind of falling out with some of the club's hierarchy at Nottingham Forest, led to him being dismissed. But look at how Ange Postecoglou is doing now. 6 games in charge, no wins. And the Nottingham Forest supporters last night, after they conceded to Midtjylland, were singing "You're getting sacked in the morning" to their own boss. Okay, so although I think part of that is aimed at Ange Postecoglou, it's also an indication of how good they had it under Nuno. And how, for the fans, even if they tried to remain positive at the time that change was made and talked up what Ange Postecoglou could bring to the table, they know deep down that they might have made a mistake here. They know deep down that Nuno Espirito Santo is a far better coach than Ange Postecoglou. And I will live and die by that opinion. Honestly, I will die on that hill because I legitimately believe that. Ange Postecoglou's gone to various countries and various leagues, and he's won things. Fine, okay? And he won the Europa League with Spurs. And people will argue that that's a bigger achievement than Nuno ever managed in his managerial career or whatever. But for me, Nuno's managed in the big leagues, and the fact that he's done that for such a long time and done so many good jobs. What he did with Forest, getting him into Europe, remarkable. What he did with Wolves, bringing him up from the Championship, and then managing, I think, 2 7th placed finishes in the Premier League. That's ridiculous. That's so good. So, I think he's too good a coach to have not had time. This sounds like it's a bloody Nuno pod. He's had enough time to implement some of his principles. And so I think that the game we're going to face is one whereby we're playing against the low block, where we've got to be wary of what they're going to do on the break, because they will be very, very, very well drilled in that sense. It won't just be hit and hope. Nuno's counter-attacking sides are very incisive in the way that they dissect defences, and it's not coincidence. It's not just giving the players free reign and license. Yeah, they have license, of course they do, but ultimately they will have a plan as to how they open us up. A lot of that plan, I think, will start from Morgan Gibbs-White, or would have started from Morgan Gibbs-White under Nottingham Forest, and I think with West Ham, it will probably start from Lucas Paqueta. I think the plan will be to get him on the ball deep and then have him hit in certain areas and certain channels that the likes of Jared Bowen will be all over. So I think when he gets the ball in the midfield, we've got to crunch him. Our press has got to be quick, it's got to be strong, and it's got to be effective. And I think, that's how they'll look to hit us. If you look at his Forest teams, Nuno's that is, it was always about getting the ball to Gibbs-White in a really deep area, him knowing exactly where he needs to put the ball, using his technical ability, vision, to then execute that, and that would often get them up the pitch and put them into situations whereby they could hurt you. So I think they'll try and replicate that with someone like Lucas Paqueta, so he's going to be really important in terms of us just paying special attention to him. If you ask me, going back to the point I was making before I went on this crazy tangent, I've done that a lot today, apologies. How do we approach this one, and what does taking the handbrake off look like for this game specifically? For me, it's playing Eze, Odegaard and Saka all in the same team. I'd play Eze from the left. I know that Trossard's been starting games from the left. I think he's been all right, but I still see Trossard as more of a super sub than anything else. Gabriel Martinelli was a nuisance to Olympiacos, particularly in that first half the other night, and I really enjoyed some of the runs that we highlighted on the review pod where he was coming inside and playing like a centre forward. But I think we're going to face a stubborn side. There isn't going to be that much room in behind, and I think we need technicians. I think we need magicians. I think we need players that are willing to take efforts from the edge of the box, and we saw Eze's more than happy to do that up at St James's Park on multiple occasions. Odegaard's playing brilliantly again, and I want to see him rotating positions with the other midfielders so that we can get the maximum out of him once more. So yeah, look, I think there's I think there's a really strong argument, and I'd be very, very surprised, and I'll even go as far as saying disappointed if we weren't to pick all those three guys in the same team, and if we were to pick a player in that attacking line that maybe isn't in tip-top form, like Leandro Trossard. Like, Trossard's been good of late, but I still wouldn't start him above Eze, not in a game like this one. Trossard will certainly play a part in the match. No doubt about that. I'd go into the game knowing full well that he probably comes on at some point. But yeah, that's the way I would approach it. And so that brings me on nicely to my starting 11 for the game. Let's have a look at it. So I'm going with Raya in goal. I'm going with Timber, Saliba, Gabriel and Calafiori. Timber comes back in at right back. Calafiori comes back in at left back because I think against low blocks, Calafiori is actually a really, really important weapon because he's quite happy to come inside and attack the corner of the box, but he's also happy to go on the outside as well, and having that variety is important. He's also a good player in terms of us protecting ourselves against the transition. Now, I know in theory that doesn't make sense because he goes roaming quite a bit, but just in terms of his ability to win 1v1 physical duels because of his superior size to someone like Miles Lewis-Skelly. I know Skelly's low centre of gravity and stocky and all the rest of it, but Calafiori isn't going to have the ball clipped over the top of his head. He's a centre-back by trade, and I think we're seeing the best version of Calafiori this season, whereby he's part of a really mean defence, but he's also someone that gives you a lot going the other way. He's a great two-way player, and I think Mikel Arteta really likes those types of players, doesn't he? My midfield would be Zubimendi, Rice and Odegaard, but also, we talked in the main pod the other day about sort of those rotations, and I think with Zubimendi, Rice and Odegaard, those rotations can happen. Rice can tuck into the 6, Zubimendi can step forward, Odegaard can drop into the 6, the other two can both comfortably play as 8, and those rotations and that variety to our game will give Odegaard and Zubimendi, more so than Rice, who I think need it more, the license to kind of get on the ball and dictate play and play passes early. Rice will be the up and down guy. He will be the athlete of the midfield. He'll be the one that eats up the ground. And that is equally as important a role, by the way. But I think those three, just like when it was Zubimendi, Odegaard and Marino in midweek, that three is rotation is able to rotate and is able to be fluid in terms of how the shape looks. It can be a double pivot with Rice and Zubimendi. It can be Zubimendi at the base and Rice and Odegaard as the 2-8s. It can be Zubimendi 6, Rice 8, Odegaard 10. It can be, it can be all sorts. It can be Rice 6, Zubimendi 8, Odegaard 8, or Odegaard 10. You can do it in all sorts of ways. And then the front three for me, I think, is a no-brainer. You go Saka on the right, you go Eze on the left, and you go Gyökeres through the middle. I thought Gyökeres was pretty good all round against Olympiacos. He didn't get his goal. I thought he was very good at Newcastle as well. I feel like that relationship is developing. He's improving week on week, and I feel like this could be his weekend. I really, really do. And I think, we've talked a lot at the start of this season about our strength in depth and about how good the squad looks. I mean, such is the strength in depth now that in the league where you're limited to a crazy... I don't want to talk about crazy. I was reading a note that was further down the screen. Such is the strength and depth now that in the league where you're limited to a number of substitutes, Mikel's kind of got some decisions to make, hasn't he, too? You think back to the Newcastle game, Ethan Nwaneri wasn't involved. And at the minute, there's no Madueke, there's no Havertz, there's no Jesus. And I wouldn't imagine there's going to be an appearance for Piero Hincapié either, because we've not seen him involved in any training or anything up until now. And I know Tom Canton said this morning that he's expecting some sort of update on the Ecuadorian's fitness today. I got to be honest, for a minute, I'd forgotten that we signed him. And I suppose that's a good thing because it shows you that we haven't really missed him or needed him up until this point. But that was a big signing and one that there's huge high hopes for. So what is the problem with Piero Hincapié? Hopefully it's nothing major and we'll see him back soon. Because over the course of the season, we will need these players. No doubt about that. Going to wrap up now with my prediction. I was spot on for the Olympiacos game. I went for an Arsenal 2-0 win. That was a game that felt like we sort of cruised through it at 70%. I think we'll need to be at better than 70% to beat West Ham. I think the Premier League throws up something very, very different. There's a history in terms of what they've managed to do recently at Emirates Stadium, which will give them a confidence and a lift going into the game. But I'm going to go with the 2-0 Arsenal win once again. It served me well in midweek. Let's hope it serves me well at the weekend. 3 points is all that matters. But as I keep saying, it's important, I think, that we start this little run now. We build a bit of a head of steam. We create some momentum. And we apply some pressure to Liverpool, who are still a couple of points above us going into the weekend. Right, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you all so much for joining me on this episode of the pod. Again, apologies, it's not a live stream, but just due to some internet issues, I figured it'd be safer to do it this way. I'm hoping that that'll all be resolved by the end of the day. That's what I've been told by Virgin Media. But they also told me a few days ago that there was no problem, only to then tell me that there is a problem in the area. It's not your home. But anyway, hopefully that's all sorted and that's all resolved, because I do miss interacting with you guys in the live chat. But we'll be back on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a wonderful day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.